Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, one and all. Welcome to another Friday edition of The Smoking Barrel. I'm Rustin Edwards, based in Geneva, with my illustrious co-host, Mr. Matt Stanley, who is catching flies, not the type
It
being
was
batted at you, in Dubai. Or is that a mosquito?
straight. You saw that. That was straight out of choom, fucking dagger hands.
Yes, Matt
Uh,
Stanley is part frog,
yes, I am. There's loads of the little bastards around, so
and
I'm
not the
watching them.
French type.
No, exactly. They're yeah. No, anyway, yeah. Greetings. Hope everyone's well. Was it a week ago that we recorded?
It was a week ago, as a matter of
God,
fact.
I just don't know what day of the week it is. What's going on? So let me give you a recap. What's happening here? Um, I went to South Africa last Saturday morning. I got back yesterday morning. To a city. No, sorry. Okay. Yeah, I went to South Africa last Saturday morning. I got back here yesterday morning, but my last travels, I got back last Friday morning. Now, the city I arrived in yesterday was a lot different to the city I arrived at last Friday morning when I came back from Thailand. It's amazing how quick things can move about. The schools are apparently going to go back on Saturday. There won't be any buses, so people don't know. My kids only go to school down the road. They're still away though, so they need to come back. There seems to be a, I wouldn't say a complacency, but the Dubai is certainly portraying that everything's over and it's all moved on and the conflict is done and now we're moving on to patching up the city. I admire that confidence, but I'm still extremely skeptical. You know, the ceasefire is still on hold. I think it expires on the 19th of April, but
That's going to be Tuesdays when it's supposed to expire.
Tuesday. So where are we now? Okay, so the 21st. Is that right?
21st to the 22nd. I think it's actually the 22nd, so that'd be Wednesday.
Okay. And yeah, so yeah, that I mean, I, for me, I think it's still a little early. I don't want to sound negative there. I think that we have to be positive, but I think until there is a firm agreement in place, under and how does this work? If there's an agreement in place, the current conflict, and that is broken, did the UN get involved at any point? Like this ceasefire, the Islamabad Accords, whatever they're going to call it, like that is an agreement between the US, Iran, and Israel, right?
No, U.S. and
That's
Iran. Israel has not been included in any of these discussions, as far as I know. It's only been
but
Iran and the United States.
okay, and that agreement, these accords, that is a contract between US and Iran. And if it's broken, who enforces it? Like, how does it work?
Well, I mean, that's going to be a question as to who is going to be considered the winner, if you want to call it that, of this whole mess that we're currently in right now. There's a lot of things that are going on right now that gives me a bit of pause as to how these negotiations really are going and how it's going to be enforced if there is some type of agreement made whole. The U.S. has made their red lines pretty adamant. No nuclear
Yeah,
enrichment, nuclear
yeah,
material, free passage of Straits of Hormuz, and no support of proxies, the Houthis, the Hamas, and Hezbollah. Iran has their 10 point that U.S. has to move all their troops out of the Middle East, yada, yada, yada. Um, However, what we're seeing happening and what's happening now is you've got another carrier battle group coming into the region over this weekend, which is the GW Bush.
okay,
She transited around South Africa and is probably going to be arriving in the operational zone within the next 2 days. You've got the
okay,
USS Boxer, which is another Marine amphibious battle group coming in as well, which should be arriving, I believe, on Monday or Tuesday from California. And so you've doubled up the amount of air naval assets in the region. On top of that, you've had a massive military airlift coming in, bringing in more troops and more weapons and more defensive weapons. So I'm cautious that there'll be a positive response to any ceasefire unless this is just adding more pressure on Iran on top of the economic pressure caused by the naval blockade of Iranian ports.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I sort of wanted to start with what's actually happening here on the ground, because that's why I'm a little. The worst thing that can happen, the worst thing that can happen here is kids go back to school and their missile alerts start going off again.
Yeah.
That breaks more trust than ever within not the system, but with because my family, for example, they'll be away 7 weeks next Tuesday. They are happy that that obviously they hated, they got a bad experience and bad memories about what happened here during the missile alerts, and it was horrific for them. And then kids get over things pretty quickly, and now they're happy, they're doing their schoolwork from abroad, but they come back in here and there will be some trepidation and anxiety. But like I said, they're quick to forget things. If that were to happen again, that will be unrecoverable for a lot of people. I get from an economic point of view that things need to get back. You need kids at school, and then parents are at work, and then people buy shit, and people go to. I get that. That's a barometer on how people come back to society, but it's still early, and it was pretty traumatic what kids were going through, and I still think things are a bit fragile. I want to be positive there, but also I couldn't give a shit if people think I'm being overly negative. 95% of the people who say that to me haven't been here during the conflict. So I don't care what you say, if I'm honest with you. But I do think that there needs to be less emphasis put on how countries have got over historical conflicts. COVID is not one of them, I should hasten to add. And how quickly they should try and get over this one. And I agree that more depth needs to be put around arguments to get people back here. Than I think is currently going on. But I'm
But
supportive, but
but
yeah.
I think that's something that everybody should be a bit cautious about their return to the region, because it is how solid is this ceasefire going to be? Is it going to be extended? If there is a peace accord, what is that going to actually look like?
Yeah.
Is the and the way things are positioning right now, it looks like the U.S. is going to enforce whatever document is agreed to with the IRGC. Um, and because they have the firepower and the manpower being put into the region. Um, I mean, because it is going to be a case of are we going to be one interdiction away from resuming hostilities?
Okay, now this term here is a shipping term that a lot of people would have heard about last few days, but I'll be honest, I haven't heard of it either. What does interdiction mean?
Interdiction, that means that you have done something to impede the passage of a vessel from its normal course of action. So interdiction means you have stopped it, you have put police forces on it. It's very similar like what happened with the Venezuelan tankers back way back in what was it, January?
Yeah.
When the US was interdicting Venezuelan tankers that were violating the sanctions against Venezuela. So they were putting actual people on board the ships, arresting the vessels, and then moving the vessels to a neutral or to a port to seize the cargo. So it is a police action
A police action. Okay. Because
or policing
here,
action.
here it is from a sort of Kepler data point of view. I would argue the closer we get to an agreement, the less transparent flow of data becomes, because I think just the closer you get to resolution, the more and more integrity, you have to have behind your data. And let me explain what I mean by that. So this US naval blockade that came up, let me share my screen, that came up on, where was it? Started what, Tuesday?
Yeah.
And everyone was, and when I was in Cape Town for the African Finance Association week, everyone was kind of waiting for something to happen. Like you would see this band of ships or something. Nothing really happened. You can see this screen here. Iran's oil machine keeps running despite US naval blockade. You can see that?
Hmm.
Okay. So Kepler's data shows Iran's loading cycle continuing through the blockade's first 3 days. Tankers still cycling back to Karg. Vessels are arriving in China and India. And 159 million barrels already past the enforcement zone ahead of the sanctions waiver expiry on the 19th of April. Now, here's the kicker. Karg, we know, we've mentioned it many times, the big loading island offshore well, not far from Bandar Mashar, right in the north of the Middle East Gulf. Here's the thing that people are looking for. There are allegedly 6 tankers that have been previously observed Chabahar, which is, I learned earlier on. Where is it? One sec.
Well, that's on the southern shore. It's in the north side of the. It's on the outside of the Straits of Hormuz, I believe,
Yes.
Peshawar is, and that's where they built their secondary export hub from.
Right. Is that near Yask then? That's that way. Is that what they
I
call it?
believe so.
Okay. So I'll bring it up on a map in a minute so you can see. But allegedly, these have departed under unclear circumstances. These 7 boats here. Now, we can't track them because AIS isn't. Well, we're not sure. I don't know that, right? I'm not going to get in trouble for that. But raising the possibility that some cargoes may have slipped through enforcement. This is specifically around tankers. You want to clarify something around boats slipping through the net, right? Which is important. So, what is that?
So, the U.S. Navy has very explicit rules that you can look up online about what they can do when it comes to a blockade. And one of the things around a blockade is, yes, they can stop the transit of economic dual use or military cargoes coming in and to out of a region. The one thing they have to allow, though, is humanitarian and food to transit through the blockade because you're not allowed to starve out a population directly.
Right.
Um, Apparently indirect starvation is okay, but direct starvation not allowed. So it is a case that so some of the ships that have been allowed to go through the blockade have been bulk carriers, container ships,
Okay.
mainly ones that are carrying food supplies into and other humanitarian goods into Iran. And then
Right.
they've been allowed to depart. So it is a case that there have been some ships that are allowed, and that's allowed due to the law of the war or law of the blockade.
Yeah.
But the economic ships, such as tankers, have not been allowed. Now, the port of Chattarbar, I was incorrect. It is not Jask. Jask is further up. It's actually near the Pakistani Iranian
Oh,
border.
there. Yeah. Yeah. There. I see. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So here's Yask, and this is obviously straight off Hormuz, and the blockade is well, we don't know. It's sitting somewhere,
Well,
say around here.
so
This is where
so
we've
the
got traffic.
actual naval ships are standing off in the Gulf of Oman.
Right, which is here.
Yeah, but
So
they're
Chabahar
probably
here.
well. So if you see where the border between Iran and Pakistan is,
Yes.
uh, right about there is where the blockade is hanging out.
You think so?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, they might have some naval assets that are going into the Gulf of Oman to do direct interdiction against ships they see coming towards the border. But under the rules of the blockade, it starts at that border line and goes all the way up to the border between Iraq and
Oh, I see what you mean. Right. Okay. Because okay, so if we just zoom out here, because the U.S. Central Command put in this red dotted line all along the Iranian south coast that
yes,
said that that's a blockade. Right. Okay.
that's the blockade line. And so with that, in order to enforce all of that, you got to have your assets basically are sitting here at the bottom between Ras Al Had and the
Which
Pakistani
is
border.
which
Uh,
is Ras Al Hard's like here, right?
yeah, Ras Al Had's that point there in Oman right there. Yep. So that's
Okay.
kind of, if you draw a line up to the Pakistani border, that's kind of like the border of interdiction at that point.
Okay. Because what we saw was a vessel. Hang on, where was it? Let me pull up the.
Oh,
We
well,
did.
there's been quite a few amount of vessels that have tried to go out and they've all turned around and head back towards Iranian waters.
Yeah, there was one specifically. We had it covered on a map. Hang on. Um, Right. Okay. Here we go. So this is written by Emmanuel, who's done a great job. So if we look at these, okay, Rich Starry.
Yeah, the Rich Starry, she's currently anchored off Kisham Islet.
Yes. So here she goes, and then here she was turned around.
Yes.
So here she was turned around doesn't necessarily mean there's U.S. naval ships here.
Well, there could have been a naval ship, it could have been a helicopter, it could have been a jet plane. It could have been just the fact that they were told, we have your position at this location. Um, Turn around.
Okay. God alive. Right. Okay. Um. Okay. Okay. I'm worried we're going to get into trouble for us, but no, no. It's, I suppose these are public maps, right? it's fine. But so okay, so the Chabahar, whatever it's called, the Chabahar article that we've written there, those are vessels that could have been loaded a long time ago, right?
Yeah, they could have been loaded a long time ago. They could have been empty and just sitting there as well.
Because I think there's too much focus on how effective is the blockade, where to me it's clear, and we said something before coming on, that people were worried that what does this blockade mean? But it does seem to be working. Is that right? Is that fair to say? I mean,
I would say that if it is probably very fair to say that it seems to be working. I mean, you've got definitely a slight change in the um, reactions of the Iranian RIRGC to the current um, conversation being held with the Pakistani government as the interculator to try to get this something done between the U.S. and Iran.
right.
So that seems to be putting, and to be quite honest, this is something that probably should have been done during the war or during the kinetic phase of the war, which was not done because there was so much fear about oil prices going to $150 a barrel.
Yeah.
Yet, this seems to be, I think even Donald Trump said it himself. This economic blockade seems to be far more effective than the bombs.
Did
Now,
he, did he say that?
yes, he did say that.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
Now, you probably would still have had to bomb the IRGC and the Iranian military to the point that they've been decimated in order to fully enact this type of blockade. Because if they had all of their missiles and everything still intact, and you put this blockade in force, they would then be attacking ships left and right, I would think, merchant ships.
Yeah.
But now, okay, they've lost that capability, and so now they're at a point where yes, they can probably still launch missiles and drones against ships, but it would not be as big a threat as it would have been a month ago.
Yeah. And it's the reason I'm being quite hesitant is because it's a lot to think about here, a lot to take in. I've certainly never
Well,
had
and
to
and
opine on anything like this. So,
and one of the other things is that U.S. or U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff General Kane made a clear point in his press conference yesterday that they've expanded the interdiction into the Pacific Ocean. So, the U.S. Navy is going to be pursuing Iranian cargoes in outside of the CENTCOM region into PACCOM region, which is where, that's another military region. The world is divided in military regions in the United States. That's how they handle things. So you have CENTCOM, which is currently the one managing everything in Middle East, Indian Ocean. You've got a Pacific Com, which basically managed everything in the Pacific Basin,
yeah.
and so they are going to be pursuing and interdicting Iranian cargoes in that neck of the woods.
Okay. Okay, this is where it comes back down to, and let's say an agreement is signed, and an agreement is signed to calm down the current conflicts, and there are certain now. Is that the path to sanctions relief for Iran?
I honestly don't know what would be put on the table at this point because I think the biggest concern that the U.S. government has, and Trump has been saying this for years, is Iran's nuclear ambitions. So I could see a structured deal where they say, okay, everything stays in place until we get control over all of your nuclear fuel that you've enriched to 60%.
Okay.
And once all that's been taken and accounted for, then we will do the next thing, and then we'll do the next thing, and then we'll do the next thing.
Okay.
So I can see something like that. And if that is what comes out of all these discussions, then everybody would get a really good idea as to how weak the IRGC really is. If that's not what comes out of these discussions, then to me, it says, okay, the IRGC is holding a tight line, and we're probably going to go back to a kinetic war at some point. So it really is going to be how bad has, how bad does the IRGC have it? And as long as this economic blockade is contained and still in place, they are running out of places to put oil, number one, or they'll run out of places to put oil. Granted, I'm sure the IRGC, the Iranian flag merchant ships that are in the Persian Gulf can load cargoes, just as like what happened with the Kuwaitis and with the Saudis and Iraqis, where
Yeah.
they're loaded ships and they're loaded sitting inside the Gulf. Iran can do the exact same thing, so they probably have a few days extra outside of this 14-day time limit, which I think we're down to 10 days to go. Where if they're not moving cargoes out, they're going to fill up their tanks.
Okay. Here's the other thing that I think a lot of people have been asking this, maybe just to themselves because they don't want to. But I get more questions of people saying, I don't want to sound stupid, but, and there's no stupid questions here. With the blockade, with a ceasefire, and with talks going on, and both parties have said that, if you're a ship owner with 270,000 tons of Murban sitting in the Middle East Gulf, why wouldn't you cross the Strait of Hormuz now?
Because there's still uncertainty as to what the status of the Straits of Hormuz is. Because, Iran, they put out their little notice to the world saying, the Straits of Hormuz is closed. You have to go through our little Lark Island toll booth area if you want to leave.
Right, hang on. This is important. So you've got 270,000 tons of crude from one of the friendly countries in the Middle East Gulf, whoever that may be. And the master said, right, I'm going through the normal traffic separation scheme. You're saying there's a chance that Iran may destroy that ship.
Well, I think the first chance you have is, has Iran actually put mines in that area? And everybody's currently defaulting to yes, they put mines there. Now, currently, what's going on is you do have an active demining operation by the U.S. Navy currently being done, where they have underwater drones that are supposedly sweeping the area to ensure there are no kinetic or no magnetic mines or ley mines, which basically sit on the bottom of the ocean and wait for the hydrostatic pressure of a ship to come in, float up, and explode. So there's a couple of different mines that they're trying to make sure there aren't there in the straits themselves. And then,
Right.
there's always the risk that, okay, how many missile launchers still does Iran have along the whole northern coast of the Straits of Hormuz that they could shoot at a tanker or a ship to make a point that you're not allowed to transit without our permission?
Okay, fine. I get that there's anxiety around going through. So let's say a ceasefire is agreed, right? Or no, sorry, there is an overall agreement, right? And it's signed on Sunday,
Okay.
right? On Monday, does every fucking ship in the Middle East Gulf transit through the Strait of Hormuz?
I think if you have a safe transit zone that has been approved and delineated that this is safe to transit, and there is no tolls and insurance says, okay, we will allow your ship, we'll cover your ship to go through that strait, then yeah, you'll have Katie bar the door. Everybody's gonna be running for the exit.
Or running the other way as well to go and reload cargo?
Well, I don't know if you'd see that happen just yet. I think you want to get everything out first.
Because
If
otherwise
you're,
you won't. Yeah, but you don't care about $100 grand a day of demurrage on an LR2 if it means you can get all the wheels in motion again.
yeah, but you have to think, okay, if you're sitting outside the Persian Gulf, outside the Straits of Hormuz right now with a ship, and things are a bit shaky on exactly what could happen, you're not going to want to risk bringing that ship into the conflict zone and then have it locked
Okay.
up for another month.
Okay, fine, fine. Right.
I mean,
So hang
I
on.
would
Let's
think,
let's just recap that. So you're saying the talks are ongoing. Trump said we're very close to a deal. However much longer with that is, we're not sure. But you're
yeah, no
saying,
one can
okay,
take the stream.
yeah, a deal is signed. Here are the points of the deal. Safe passage is agreed. Traffic separation scheme may be the IMO rules. Normal, normal, normal. Here are those coordinates because we've swept for mines. Insurance says we agree as per this deal because that war risk committee will get together quickly on the Lloyd's floor.
Yep,
And then all of that is passed to the market. And then that's it.
that's it for what?
Well, I mean, back to normality.
Well, we might be back to a sense of normality. But it's going to take time for once things start moving again and we start getting ships transiting normally through the Straits of Hormuz, the economic and supply damage to the global network has to be fixed.
Oh no, no, I know that. Yeah,
And that's
absolutely.
going to take time, a lot of time.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, when you think of the supply shortages, because you don't, and again, the other piece that nobody really knows yet is what is the actual status of all the refineries that got hit
Yeah.
during the kinetic action?
Yeah. I've had a lot of
Um,
questions. We've had a lot of questions about this, and I don't think that people know. And I said it to you last week that it's
well,
not just.
I would think that the NOCs know, but they're not telling anybody.
I would probably agree with that.
Yeah. And so nobody will know until you actually start seeing the tenders that should be coming out. Do they come out?
Yeah. And I think it's 40 days today. It'd be what, 7 weeks tomorrow, right?
Yep.
Nothing has moved. There might be the East-West pipeline. We knew that was a mitigant, and the Abcop pipeline, but they were running anyway. Essentially, not. I think we're back now. Amina wrote something at the start of the week. Sorry, that said. Let me share this. Saudi Arabia restores East-West pipelines, and now we're back. Full throughput of 7 million barrels a day. So that's good. That will continue. I would imagine that will continue full tilt for the foreseeable future.
Yes.
And I can't see, and then, but nothing else. I mean, we heard some Iraqi fuel oil is going to move via Banias in Syria. We heard some Iraqi naphtha is going to move into Aqaba in Jordan. But you're talking about trucking that, and that's just not sustainable.
No,
It's
no.
it's in. Yeah,
How many trucks it actually have to make that actually work? I mean, yeah, it's not a sustainable activity. If anything, the one thing about this whole thing is like how quickly do other pipelines get built to alternative ports to ensure that this is never going to happen again.
yeah.
Because that's the one, the one weak link in the whole energy network that we currently have is Hormuz. Secondary is Bab el-Mandeb, but primarily it's Hormuz.
Yeah. But I mean, look, I feel more anxious about this weekend and coming into the ceasefire until Wednesday than I have done throughout the whole conflict, because I feel like we're close to a resolution, and it's
Well,
that last 2% that's always the most difficult.
and that is, I'm right there with you because we could either be seeing this coming to a fruition, and Monday morning comes around, and happy days. There's peace. We've got this. We got that. We got that. Cargoes are moving. The markets can take a breath and relax. But as you said, one wrong misstep and missiles and bombs could be flying because the US has restocked all their supplies and they've got more firepower in region now.
What about Israel? What? So you said the agreements between US and Iran. If Israel decide to attack again, Tehran, doesn't that break the whole thing again?
Of course it would. Of course it would. So, I mean, there would have to be, the US would have to tell Israel to chill.
Right. So Israel and Lebanon have signed a 10-day ceasefire. We saw that in Washington yesterday, right?
Yep.
But they were firing on Tehran as well. We all saw that. It was a US Israel Iran war. But Israel are not part of any peace deal. And is that a concern?
Again, I think the idea is that the US will keep Israel in check.
Okay.
Because even the Israel-Lebanon peace deal was done by the United States in a good faith effort in order to keep Iran at the table.
Okay. Look, I think you and I will be recording either early or mid next week once we hear from this. Probably, I don't know. We'll have to see. But it's like I said, things are moving positively, but it's just like, when you're close to buying a house and you're like, okay, well, you do the 60% in advance. You're like, I know where I want to live. I know what kind of house I want, and I know what street I want to be on, and I'm going to get the mortgage. And then I put the bid in, and the offer's accepted, and then you sign the contract. And
I
forget
think,
all the other 97% you've done. It's that signing the contract. You're like this.
well, it's signing the contract, and then you have the contingencies in the contract that if one of these things fall apart, the deal's off.
Yeah.
And that could be exactly where we're at. I mean, there are a lot of parts here that have to align to make this all come together. And it's a question of will. I mean, is the Iranian regime to the point where they're willing to say, okay, we're done. Let's make sure this because we have a lot of work to do. I mean, I saw the estimates about $270 billion in damage to repair.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you have to pay for your cronies, you got to pay for your regime forces, you got to pay for your proxies. And if you're not getting any money in because you're basically frozen out of the markets, those bills become rather enormous rather quickly.
Well, that's why sanctions relief goes a long way to help that.
Yes, it would, but I think there's going to be, I don't think sanctions relief will be done. I mean, if that's done day one, then that is the worst negotiation ever I would ever think from the United States.
Yeah. All right, but look, we didn't even get to where flat price is. Let's have a look. Just quick on before we go.
Funnily
Window.
enough, flat price is roughly where it was last week when we recorded, despite
Yeah,
all
it
the
is.
volatility in the market.
Yeah, here we are. $98.35 for Brent. Where did it close last Friday? Which was the what? 10th, 95.20. We're a bit higher. But we were
Yeah, but I think
94.
when we recorded, the market was also a bit higher because last week when you look at where the market went, it was anywhere between 96 or 95 up to 99 or 98, 98 and a quarter.
Yeah, I mean, look, last Monday we traded 100. Well, it closed $109.77. Gas
Yes.
oil come off. We're 150 on Brent on gas oil. Look, we were up here at one stage.
Yep.
So look, markets are calmer. Dollar off. Cable 135 as weak as it's been for a long time. Um, I don't know. Look, I mean, here's one last one. Let's say we record Wednesday and everything's agreed. Where's flat price then?
Oh, I think we're in the 80s. I don't see markets. I don't see markets going back to 50 or 60 because of the immense hole that's been created in supply across the whole entire supply chain that has to be
Yeah,
refilled. I don't, and it really depends on what's the status of Iranian oil as well, because that's going to dictate, what has been agreed to. If Iran can ramp up to 3 million barrels a day of exports because they have sanctions relief, then yeah, we could see lower. But I think getting to 80 is probably where we go because there's a lot of work that still needs to be done on the product side, and we have a immense deficit in products right now.
absolutely huge. All right, nice one, mate. Well, let's chat early next week. Stay safe, everyone, and just
But,
don't
and
just be careful still.
as we say, click like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you all next week.
Ciao.